when I got the text from my neighbor Ted. Just 4 words. "Bro, come home now." I knew something was wrong. Ted wasn't the dramatic type. This was the guy who once calmly finished mowing his lawn during a tornado warning. So when he sent that message, I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my keys, bolted from work, and raced home like my house was on fire. Nothing could have prepared me for the scene that greeted me when I pulled into my driveway. My backyard, my pride and joy, was under siege. Workers buzzed around like a swarm of angry bees, hoisting ladders, hanging banners, unloading speakers, and setting up tables across the grass. But the worst part, they had built a full wooden platform on top of my pool. Not beside it, not near it, right across the water I had spent 3 years saving to build, with a top-tier programmable wave system hidden underneath the tiles. Now, it looked like someone was throwing a pop-up music festival in my backyard. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next part. I stood there, frozen, coffee forgotten, jaw practically touching the driveway. Pink and white streamers floated in the breeze. A DJ tested speakers by blasting bass so loud it rattled my windows. And in the center of it all stood a blonde woman in designer sunglasses, barking orders through a megaphone like she was leading a military operation. She spun around, caught sight of me, and without missing a beat, marched straight over, iced coffee in hand. "Oh, good you're home," she chirped, as if I were the hired help. "We're almost finished setting up for Caitlin's Sweet 16. Just try not to walk through the flower arch. It's delicate." I stared at her, words stuck, somewhere between shock and rage. "Who are you?" I finally managed. She raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. "Karen, HOA vice president, and Caitlin's mom." "You didn't get the memo?" "Memo?" I shook my head, still trying to process. Karen huffed, sipping her drink dramatically. "We needed a space big enough for the party, and your pool wasn't being used anyway. The HOA had a vote. Honestly, I assumed you'd be honored." Honored. I glanced over at Ted, who stood at the fence, mouthing silently, "I told you." Meanwhile, Karen flipped open a clipboard like she was sealing some kind of real estate deal. "Don't worry," she added brightly, "we'll be out by midnight. Plus, you'll get a community recognition certificate. That's better than rent money, right?" It took everything I had not to burst out laughing or screaming. Instead, I pulled out my phone, flipped on the camera, and hit record. The moment Karen noticed the red light, her whole demeanor shifted. The megaphone lowered, and her smile stretched so tight it looked painful. "Oh, come on now," she said in a syrupy tone. "Let's not make this into drama." "Drama? Lady, you turned my private property into a public circus without permission. You don't know the meaning of drama. Yet." I panned the camera slowly, capturing everything: the trespassing workers, the illegal stage, the bartenders rolling kegs across my lawn. I made sure to get a close-up of Karen, too, looking like she wanted to crawl out of her own skin. "You want drama?" I said calmly. "Fine. I'll give you drama." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, HOA charter spread out in front of me like a war map. If Karen thought she could find some dusty old clause giving her the right to hijack my pool, she was wrong. I scanned every line, and just to be sure, I called my cousin Brian, a real estate attorney who still owed me for helping him move last summer. He read the documents and laughed so hard he sent me a video of himself, wiping tears from his eye. "They've got nothing," he said between gasps. "You could sue them 6 ways to Sunday and win every single time. They're trespassing. Plain and simple." I hung up feeling a deep, grim satisfaction. But as much as I loved the idea of dragging Karen and her clipboard into court, I had a better idea. Something quicker, something more poetic. You see, my pool wasn't just for show. Thanks to a bonus last year, I had installed a programmable wave system designed for surf training. Settings ranged from gentle ripples to a full simulated tsunami. I had never used anything above level 1, until now. That night, I sat in the dark, phone in hand, staring at the glowing Activate title shift button on the app. My thumb hovered over it. I didn't press it, not yet. Tomorrow was the party, the grand event where Karen would strut and preen in front of 200 teenagers and parents, basking in stolen glory. If there's one thing I knew about people like Karen, it's that nothing hurts them more than public humiliation. Ruin the party quietly, that would be satisfying. Ruin it loudly, on camera, in front of the whole town, that would be unforgettable. Tomorrow, Karen's real party would begin. And this time, the waves weren't going to be gentle. By the next afternoon, my backyard didn't look like a backyard anymore. It looked like a Hollywood production set that had been dropped on a suburban lawn and left to bake in the sun. Pink and gold streamers crisscrossed the air. A balloon arch twice the size of my garage framed the platform, now sitting like a ticking time bomb atop my pool. Folding chairs, rented plants, catering tables, even a cotton candy machine. All of it crammed onto the plywood dance floor that floated dangerously above the water. Ed wandered over around 4 o'clock, wearing sunglasses and carrying a six-pack. He handed me one without a word and stood beside me, surveying the scene like we were two soldiers about to storm enemy lines. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded slowly, eyes locked on Karen as she barked orders at a pair of teenage boys struggling to assemble a photo backdrop. She made her choice. Now it's time for the pool to make hers. Ted cracked his beer open and chuckled. "Wave mode 3? I smirked. "Wave mode 3. So Karen, of course, had no idea that beneath her carefully orchestrated chaos, the very ground she stood on was about as stable as her HOA leadership. She spent the next few hours parading around with a clipboard and a permanent fake smile, greeting arriving guests as if this were her private estate instead of my hijacked backyard. Parents in expensive golf shirts and teenagers in glittering outfits trickled in, dodging the maze of decoration. Every few minutes, someone would stumble slightly on the platform, frown in confusion, then shake it off. The surface was already vibrating gently under the strain of 100 dancing feet. And I hadn't even touched the real settings yet. By 7 p.m., the DJ, a wiry guy in a neon tank top who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in weeks, started blasting music loud enough to rattle the windows across the street. The dance floor thumped and shivered with every beat, the subtle wave mode 1 creating just enough instability to keep everyone slightly off balance without realizing why. Karen grabbed the microphone and launched into a speech dripping with fake sincerity, thanking the HOA, the parents, the vendors, and finally, herself. She didn't mention me once. Not even a token acknowledgement that this was all taking place on someone else's private property. That was fine. I didn't need thanks. I needed patience. The sun dipped lower, and as the sky turned a soft pink, I slipped inside, grabbed a cold drink, and pulled up the Wave Machine app on my phone. I watched the crowd through the window as the party kicked into high gear. Girls squealed as they took selfies. Boys in sagging suits tried to impress them with awkward dance moves. A group of moms gossiped by the catering tables, sipping overpriced mocktails. I waited, sipping my own drink slowly, like a king overlooking a soon-to-be-conquered kingdom. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. The choreographed solo dance from Caitlin herself, the birthday princess. The DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "Give it up for the birthday girl!" The music shifted to a dramatic pop anthem. Caitlin, wearing a pink ball gown that probably cost more than my last 3 car payments combined, stepped onto the center of the platform, striking a practiced pose. Phones whipped into the air as proud parents and friends recorded the big moment. I smiled, opened the app and tapped Wave Mode 2. The shift was immediate but subtle. The platform began to gently pulse beneath Caitlin's feet, almost like the stage was breathing. She wobbled slightly, caught herself, then kept dancing, flashing a forced grin. The crowd cheered louder, mistaking her near miss for a stylistic flourish. The DJ, oblivious, cranked the bass higher, causing the platform to flex rhythmically under the added weight. Drinks sloshed, plates wobbled. A tray of cupcakes tilted ominously near the edge of the table. Karen, of course, noticed nothing. She beamed like the queen of the county fair, waving at guests and posing for pictures like she hadn't committed 6 different crimes by noon. I watched from my balcony, thumb hovering over the last button on the app, Wave Mode 3, Disruptive Current. I waited until Caitlin moved into the center of the stage, surrounded by the tightly packed crowd. Then, with the slow, deliberate motion of a man opening Pandora's box, I tapped the button. The plywood stage pitched hard to the left. Dozens of feet scrambled for footing. Someone's drink flew into the air, splattering a group of moms in matching floral dresses. Caitlin shrieked as she stumbled into the balloon arch, popping 3 balloons and causing the structure to sag dramatically. The DJ tried to save it. "Everybody make some noise," he shouted, throwing his hands up as if the chaos was all part of the show. That's when the first speaker tipped over. It crashed into the edge of the stage with a heavy thud, causing a visible ripple across the plywood. Another guest slipped and landed hard on his back. Someone screamed, someone else laughed. The crowd rippled like a school of fish sensing a predator. Parents grabbed their kids. Drinks spilled across the surface, making everything even slicker. Karen grabbed the mic again, yelling, "It's fine! It's part of the ambiance!" But even she was losing her footing. I hit the disruption loop, a programmed sequence that made the stage bounce slightly with random pulses, designed to simulate natural turbulence. It worked beautifully. People stumbled everywhere. A tray of cupcakes slid across the floor like a sugary torpedo, crashing into the DJ booth. The DJ yelped as frosting smeared across his control board, causing the music to glitch into a horrifying electronic shriek. Now fully panicked, guests scrambled off the stage. One dad slipped and cannonballed straight into the shallow end of the pool. His teenage daughter screamed like she was being chased by a shark. Decorations flew, balloons popped. The entire plywood structure began to sag ominously under the combined weight of soaked plywood and terrified party guests. At the center of it all stood Karen, her perfect hair askew, mascara streaking, screaming orders no one could hear over the chaos. She looked like the captain of a sinking ship, still trying to steer as the ocean swallowed her whole. I decided then, mercifully, to turn the waves back down to mode 1. I didn't want anyone truly hurt. I just wanted the memory burned into every single person's mind, and judging by the looks on their faces as they fled the backyard, dripping wet and wide-eyed, mission accomplished. Karen, slipping, cursing, and finally plunging into the pool with a spectacular splash was just the cherry on top. Ted caught it all on camera, and the night was only getting started. The aftermath was something straight out of a reality show that had lost its budget halfway through filming. As Karen sputtered and flailed her way out of the pool, the few guests who hadn't already fled stood frozen in shock, their phones held aloft, recording every second. Some out of disbelief, most out of sheer petty joy. Ted, ever the opportunist, was already uploading the footage to the neighborhood Facebook group and 3 different viral video subreddits before Karen's head even fully cleared the water. I stood calmly by the patio door, sipping my iced tea, pretending to look concerned while secretly marveling at the poetic justice unfolding in front of me. The once carefully curated Sweet 16 had devolved into soaked teenagers crying over ruined dresses, furious parents shouting about property damage, and a birthday girl sobbing into the frosting-smeared remnants of her cake. Pink balloons floated sadly across the pool, bumping against fallen strobe lights and half-sunk chairs. It was a painting of disaster. Messy, loud, and beautiful. Karen, dripping and furious, tried to regain control. She grabbed the microphone again, which gave a pathetic electronic squeal as water dripped into its circuits. "Nobody panic," she shrieked, voice cracking. "This is under control." It was in fact the furthest thing from control anyone had ever witnessed. As she slipped again, nearly pulling down the makeshift balloon arch with her, Ted muttered from the fence, "Well, she's under something, gravity mostly." I couldn't hold back a small laugh as Karen waved frantically at the HOA president, Dennis, who had finally arrived late to the event, looking like he regretted every life choice that had brought him to this moment. Dennis, in his pastel polo and khakis, stared wide-eyed at the mess, visibly debating whether to pretend he was just passing by or admit affiliation. Karen grabbed his sleeve and hissed something in his ear, probably begging for him to do something, anything to salvage her shattered fantasy. Meanwhile, guests were abandoning ship. Parents rounded up their kids, slipping and sliding across the wobbling platform. High heels snapped, dress shoes soaked through. A catering table, its legs bowing under the stress, finally gave out, sending half-eaten cupcakes and lukewarm punch into the deep end. The DJ, either completely resigned or still slightly high, was casually packing up his gear, whistling an off-key tune as if none of this was his problem. And then, like a final punctuation mark on the evening, Ted's drone, which he had launched earlier without anyone noticing, descended from the sky, its camera light blinking red like the all-seeing eye of suburban judgment. Karen, already dripping and furious, caught sight of it just as it buzzed overhead. She let out a screech so loud it startled a flock of birds out of a nearby tree and squatted at the drone like it was a giant mosquito. Ted piloted it expertly just out of reach, the device capturing perfect high-definition footage of the queen of the HOA drenched, disheveled, and defeated. The internet would eat it alive. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching as Karen finally realized her battle was lost. The guests were gone, the decorations ruined, and her reputation drowning faster than her ruined clipboard. She locked eyes with me across the sagging platform, her face twisted into a mask of pure rage and humiliation. "You'll pay for this," she hissed, voice ragged. I tilted my head, smiling politely. "No, Karen," I said, keeping my voice light but firm. "You already did." Ted snorted so loudly he had to pretend to cough to cover it up. Karen stomped off toward her car, squelching with every wet step, her designer handbag dripping water onto the sidewalk. Behind her, Dennis and the remaining HOA board members huddled like survivors of a shipwreck, avoiding eye contact with anyone and everyone. The neighborhood had seen everything. No amount of spin could cover up what had happened here tonight. The next morning, the fallout began. It started small. A few blurry photos on Facebook, a couple of videos circulating via text threads among neighbors. Then someone, probably Ted, posted the full drone footage to r/A2nightmares with the caption, "When Karen builds a party on your pool and you control the ocean." Within hours, it exploded. By noon, the video had been picked up by several meme pages, racked up 500,000 views, and sparked hundreds of savage comment threads. My favorite? "This is why I don't trust people who drink iced coffee through a straw." By dinner time, the local news had called Ted, asking for permission to use the footage in a segment titled "Suburban Showdown: When Parties Go Wild." Karen's face, soaked, shrieking, mascara running like a horror movie villain, was now immortalized in internet history. I spent that Sunday afternoon sitting on my porch, sipping another cold drink, watching neighbors walk by, each offering a discreet thumbs up, a conspiratorial grin, or a muttered, "Good job, man." It wasn't just about the party anymore. It was about what Karen represented, years of silent resentment, nitpicking, and fear under the thumb of someone who wielded HOA rules like a weapon. And now, finally, the neighborhood had seen her for what she truly was. Ted wandered over just before sunset, holding up his phone with a huge grin. "Dude, 2 million views," he said, and counting. I chuckled. "Think she'll try to sue?" He shrugged. "Let her try. Public property footage, private property rights, First Amendment. She'd have better luck suing the ocean." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the ruined plywood dance floor still sagging sadly across my pool. Somewhere down the street, a teenager blasted Celine Dion's "My Heart Will Go On" at full volume, and I heard laughter echoing into the warm evening air. The best part? I hadn't even needed to press charges yet. Karen was sinking under the weight of her own hubris, and the real show hadn't even started. Not yet. The Monday after the wave party disaster, my doorbell rang at exactly 9:00 a.m. I opened it to find Karen standing there, clipboard in hand, makeup caked on to mask the remnants of the public humiliation she'd endured. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and her smile looked painful, like it was being forced through a wall of gritted teeth. "Good morning," she said sweetly, the kind of sweet that only comes right before someone tries to stab you with legal paperwork. "We need to discuss the damages you caused." I took a slow sip of my coffee and leaned casually against the doorframe. Damages I caused? I repeated. You mean the damages caused by the party you illegally threw on my property without permission? Karen's smile faltered slightly but held. She cleared her throat and lifted her clipboard like a shield. The HOA has decided that your actions endangered community members, and therefore, you're responsible for all repairs and replacements. She handed me a thin packet of papers, fake citations, absurdly inflated repair costs, even a bill for the ruined floral arch, which they had valued at something just shy of a new car. I flipped through it slowly, biting back a laugh. Each page was more ridiculous than the last: emotional distress charges, DJ equipment reimbursement, catering cancellation fees. It was a masterpiece of delusion. I looked up at her. Karen, do you want me to read these back to you, or just forward them straight to my lawyer? The smile snapped off her face like a cheap mask. We're trying to handle this neighborly, she hissed under her breath, eyes darting around as if hoping nobody was recording this. You can either work with us, or things can get messy. I grinned. Karen, messy was Saturday night. You're about 3 breakdowns too late for threats. She turned on her heel with a dramatic huff and stormed back down the driveway, shoes squelching in the wet patches left behind by the collapsed plywood stage. I watched her go, amused, already knowing exactly how this was going to end. Because what Karen didn't realize, or maybe refused to accept, was that the internet had already decided her fate. By noon, the viral video had surpassed 3 million views. News sites picked it up. Morning radio shows cracked jokes about it, and one particularly creative user edited a full cinematic trailer titled Karen, Queen of the Splash, complete with slow-motion shots of her flailing through the air like a soggy soap opera villain. Ted stopped by that afternoon with updates. The HOA subreddit moderators just made a highlight reel of her greatest hits, he said, handing me his phone. It's got her falling into the pool, the plywood cracking, the cupcake tray sliding into the DJ booth. It's art. I laughed until my sides hurt, but deep down I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her never know when to stop digging their own graves. Sure enough, the next day I received an email from the new HOA interim president, Dennis, the guy who had once been Karen's biggest yes man, but was now scrambling to distance himself from the wreckage. The email apologized for any confusion surrounding recent unauthorized community events and announced an emergency board meeting to address leadership concerns. Translation: Karen was about to be served up as the sacrificial goat to save whatever was left of the HOA's reputation. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday evening at the community center. Ted and I decided it was only fair to attend, purely as concerned citizens, of course. By the time Saturday rolled around, the buzz was electric. Word had spread. People brought folding chairs, popcorn, even coolers like it was a block party. Someone brought a Bluetooth speaker and looped Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On as the unofficial theme song. A teenager handed out printed, I Survived the Wave Party stickers. Karen showed up 15 minutes late, wearing a conservative navy suit 2 sizes too tight, and an expression that said she'd spent all week practicing her speech in front of a mirror. She climbed onto the makeshift stage at the front of the room, a terrible idea given her recent history with platforms, and cleared her throat dramatically. My fellow neighbors, she began, voice trembling with manufactured emotion. I know mistakes have been made, misunderstandings have occurred, but let's not let one incident define all the hard work I've done for this community. There were scattered groans. Someone coughed loudly, and it suspiciously sounded like the word "tunam." Aaron pressed on, oblivious. Leadership isn't about popularity. It's about making tough decisions for the good of everyone. It's about order, structure, safety, and yes, sometimes sacrifices must be made. Like my pool? I called from the back. Laughter exploded through the room. Karen's face turned beet red. She stammered, tried to recover, but the audience was already lost. Hands shot up. Questions rained down faster than she could answer. Why was the party unauthorized? Who approved the use of private property? How much HOA money had been spent without approval? Karen flailed, verbally this time, trying to spin excuses, clerical errors, miscommunications, good intentions. But nobody was buying it. The footage was undeniable, the memes were unforgiving, the community for once was united, and not behind her. Finally, Dennis stepped up, clipboard in hand, and took the mic. "A motion has been proposed," he said loudly over the din, "to remove Karen from her position effective immediately, pending a full investigation." The room erupted into cheers. Ted leaned over to me and whispered, "Best neighborhood meeting ever." I just smiled and watched as Karen's reign crumbled around her, piece by piece, as neighbors who once cowered before her fines and citations now raised their hands eagerly to vote her out. The final tally wasn't even close. It was over. Karen, shoulders sagging, clipboard dangling limply from one hand, fled the stage without another word. No grand speeches, no defiant exit, just a sad, soggy retreat, fitting for the queen of the splash. And standing in the middle of it all, I realized something important. Karen hadn't just lost her position, she had lost her power. And once you take away a Karen's clipboard, you take away her kingdom. The days following Karen's downfall felt like a long overdue spring cleaning, not just of flower beds and gutters, but of power, silence, and fear. For years she'd ruled the HOA like a clipboard-wielding queen, handing out fines for trivial offenses like off-toned garden gnomes or flamboyant mailbox flags. But after her dramatic ousting, the entire neighborhood began to breathe differently. You could feel it in the way people waved longer at each other. You could hear it in the laughter drifting from front porches that had once been silent under her reign. It started small. Cheryl, who once cried over a $50 0-cent citation for aggressively festive Halloween decor, finally replaced her beige welcome mat with one that read, "Come back with tacos." She placed it proudly, like planting a flag in freshly liberated land. The Joneses, a quiet couple who'd been scolded for having non-regulation tomato cages, suddenly had a full vegetable stand in their driveway offering free produce, and a hand-painted sign that said, "Approved by common sense, not Karen." Then came the real wave, the HOA petition audit. It began as a casual thread on the neighborhood Facebook group. A user named Mailbox Maverick posted, "Anyone else have a weird Karen story?" The comment section exploded like a busted hydrant. There were hundreds of stories. One neighbor had been fined for suspicious birdhouses, another for laundry hung too passionately. Someone swore Karen once measured their grass with a ruler. Soon, a formal petition circulated demanding an audit of all HOA citations and expenses from the last 2 years. They needed 50 signatures to force a special meeting. They got 97 in 36 hours. I signed it with the same pen Karen once used to fine me for pool cover clashing with HOA's seasonal palette. By that Friday, Ted swung by with a case of root beer and a grin so wide it made me nervous. "Check the group chat," he said, dropping into one of my lawn chairs like he owned it. "You've started something." I opened my phone and scrolled. Someone had photoshopped Karen's clipboard into a flaming sword and edited her into a fantasy movie poster titled Game of Homes. Another person made an AI-generated song called Wave Goodbye Karen. It was shockingly catchy, but what really got me? A teenage kid from 2 blocks over posted a photo of a small wooden sign staked in their yard. It read, "This land is not HOA approved," and never was. That's when I realized this was more than just about me, or my pool, or even Karen. This was about reclaiming our homes, emotionally, legally, and culturally. For too long, everyone had lived under the specter of arbitrary citations and passive-aggressive newsletters. And now, the spell was broken. The new HOA board, clearly rattled by the mass uprising, called a community waiting open forum. No speeches, no hierarchy, just a microphone and time slots. The turnout was massive. People brought folding chairs, lawn snacks, even toddlers with little "I survived the splash" shirts. The forum opened with Cheryl recounting how Karen once cited her for having wind chimes that sounded too whimsical. Then came Jim, who revealed that Karen had issued him a written warning for leaving a hose uncoiled during a thunderstorm. When my name was called, I stepped up slowly, the weight of the crowd's expectation resting on my shoulders like a ceremonial sash. I cleared my throat, smiled, and said, "I'm the guy with the wave pool." Laughter rolled through the crowd like thunder. Then I got serious. I didn't turn on the waves because I wanted to be petty. I did it because someone decided that my home was hers to control, that my yard, my pool, my privacy could be signed away with a clipboard and a bad attitude. I pushed back because if we don't stand up once, we'll get walked on forever. A pause, a breath, but what I didn't expect was that I wouldn't be standing alone. Applause erupted. Genuine, loud. Some people stood. Ted gave me a slow clap, dramatically over the top, which made me laugh through the seriousness. Afterward, the board voted unanimously to approve a full audit, both of Karen's spending and her enforcement record. They also voted to revise the HOA charter, adding protections for homeowners against unchecked executive power. Finally, but the best part? That came the next day. Someone, anonymous, but we all had our guesses, placed a cardboard cutout of Karen at the community entrance. She stood frozen in mid-fall, clipboard flying, sunglasses crooked, mouth open in cartoonish horror. A plastic flamingo stood beside her with a speech bubble. "Don't make me call the HOA." No one took it down. Instead, people took selfies with it. Karen, of course, was nowhere to be found. Her house was dark, the blinds were closed. Rumor was she was packing. Ted swore he saw a "for sale" sign leaning behind her trash bins. "She's leaving in shame," he whispered, like a town crier, and I didn't even need to wave a pitchfork. The neighborhood had become something new, freer, funnier, louder. Not because we'd kicked out a villain, but because we'd remembered how to be a community again. Not HOA community, a real one, messy, colorful, human. And somewhere in my garage, tucked between the lawn fertilizer and the broken Christmas lights, sat a clipboard I'd found floating in the pool after the party. I'd kept it as a souvenir, not out of spite, well, maybe a little, but as a reminder of what happens when one person forgets that rules don't trump respect, and what happens when the rest of us remember that sometimes the best rebellion starts with a ripple. The morning Karen moved out felt like waking up from a long neighborhood nightmare. It had been a week since the emergency HOA meeting where her clipboard reign was officially dismantled. The vote wasn't close. People didn't even whisper about it anymore. It was just done. The final blow came when a quiet man named Roger, who everyone thought was just the guy with the koi pond, stood up and calmly read a detailed spreadsheet showing HOA funds spent on personal purchases. Lawn, flamingos, catering receipts, a suspicious invoice labeled event staging dated the same day as Caitlin's infamous party. Karen didn't even bother denying it. She just walked off the stage and never came back. That morning, a moving truck rolled into her driveway just after 7 a.m. No one helped. No one offered coffee. There was no send-off. She loaded her boxes silently, her face stiff, her little dog barking at shadows. Ted, of course, filmed it from his porch with the same tone you'd use for a wildlife documentary. Here we witness the suburban Karen in retreat. Observe how she protects her clipboard while circling the moving crew like a displaced queen. I laughed harder than I expected, not because it was cruel, but because it was done. The power was gone, the illusion broken, and we had all survived it. By the afternoon, she was gone. The "for sale" sign was already slightly crooked, as if the property itself was trying to shake off the years of HOA tyranny it had absorbed. A new couple moved in 3 days later. A pair of young parents, both teachers, with 2 kids and a puppy that barked with joy instead of judgment. They held a simple welcome cookout that first weekend. No permits, no wristbands, no clipboard, just hot dogs, lemonade, music on a Bluetooth speaker, and laughter spilling into the cul-de-sac like a breath of fresh air. I brought over a cooler of sodas and introduced myself. The husband shook my hand with a smile and said, "You're the pool guy, right? My cousin sent me the wave party video. Man, that was epic." I grinned, guilty. He laughed and added, "If you ever need help fixing that platform damage, I'm a contractor. On the house. Consider it community service." It was the first time I felt proud of how it had all gone down. In the following weeks, something remarkable happened. The neighborhood that had once tiptoed under HOA watch transformed into something real. Lawns got a little longer, but laughter got louder. People hung wind chimes without fear. Kids left bikes in driveways and weren't reported. Garden gnomes returned in full force. One neighbor even set up a gnome rebellion scene, complete with tiny protest signs. The community wasn't falling apart, it was finally breathing. One night Ted came over with a bag of marshmallows and said, "We should christen the new era." We set up a fire pit in my backyard, invited the neighbors, and before long half the street was out there roasting s'mores and retelling their favorite Karen stories like old war tales. Someone brought out a cake shaped like a clipboard that read "R.I.P. Queen of Fines." We laughed until our sides hurt. And then, as the fire dimmed, someone asked me a quiet question. "Do you regret it? The wave thing?" I thought about it, really thought about it. About the footage, the chaos, the memes, the brief moment of becoming a suburban folk hero. And I shook my head. Not one bit. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reminding people that you can't just steal peace and expect silence. Sometimes, the only way to get through to a bully is to make waves. That line ended up on a t-shirt someone made later. They sold out in a week. The next morning, I stood at my pool, freshly cleaned, refilled, and glistening under the sunlight. The plywood scars were long gone. In their place, a new deck shimmered with solar-powered lights and weather-sealed wood, donated and installed by volunteers from the neighborhood. At the edge of the deck, I'd installed a small brass plaque. It read, "To community, clarity, and the day the waves came." I smiled, sipped my coffee, and opened the app on my phone. Wave mode off, for now. Because this time, we didn't need a wave to get people to show up. We just needed to remember that a community built on fear falls fast, but one built on respect, that's the kind that floats. Karen didn't leave with a bang. No final clipboard wave, no neighborhood announcement, not even a passive-aggressive email. Just a moving truck that showed up quietly one morning, idling awkwardly in her driveway, like it didn't want to be there either. Her porch light was still flickering from the last time someone unplugged the wrong cord during her infamous Sweet 16 disaster. The HOA didn't host a farewell. No one offered to help her pack. She carried boxes alone, barking orders at the movers, while her yappy dog protested every breeze. Ted filmed it from his lawn like it was a nature documentary. "Here we see the suburban Karen in retreat," he whispered, having failed her final dominance display. By the end of the week, her house was sold. The new owners were a young couple with a Labrador and 2 kids, one already running around the backyard in a superhero cape. The woman waved the first time we met and said, "We've heard stories." Her husband, a pool contractor, laughed and added, "You really made waves." I told them they were welcome to use the pool anytime, just maybe skip the plywood dance floor. With Karen gone, things shifted faster than anyone expected. The HOA board, freshly rebuilt and clipboard-free, reversed dozens of Karen's citations. Wind chimes were allowed again. So were flamingos, string lights, and garden gnomes with political hats. Someone even unboxed a forgotten lawn fountain that Karen had banned for being too whimsical. Community spirit, long buried beneath rules and fines, started to breathe again. That weekend, neighbors gathered, not for an official meeting or an approved celebration, but just because. No permits, no catering, no DJ. Just folding chairs, paper plates, and enough potato salad to feed an army. Ted projected the greatest hits of Karen's downfall onto his garage door, drone footage, wave mode disasters, and of course, the legendary pool fall in glorious slow motion. Every time she flailed through the air like a soggy confetti cannon, the crowd roared. Someone brought a clipboard-shaped cake with R.I.P. Karen's reign scrawled across it in red icing. Another neighbor, who once got fined for a mailbox 2 shades too bright, gave me a 6-pack and a thank you card. The note just said, "You didn't just save your yard, you saved our sanity." That night, my backyard felt more alive than it ever had. Kids were splashing, neighbors were laughing, music drifted through the breeze without anyone measuring decibel levels. There was no agenda, just people being people again, unfiltered, unsupervised, and free. Later, as the crowd thinned and the last paper lanterns flickered out, I stood by the edge of the pool, drink in hand, and looked out over the water. Still and clean, no plywood, no DJ booth, no floral arch teetering on the deep end. Just peace, just home. And as I stood there, I opened my app one last time and tapped Wave Mode 1. The water rippled gently, just enough to shimmer in the moonlight. Not chaos, not revenge, just a reminder. The clipboard is gone, but the current? Still mine. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.